Okay, this is Colin Thompson interviewing
Bruce Hendrix,
Bruce Hendrix on the
retired
28th of January.
Army.
Yeah, so to start with, could you give me your full name and date of birth?
Full name is Bruce Dean Hendrix Jr. Date of birth is November 1368.
And what were your official jobs while you were in the military?
Official jobs while I was in the military? Well, when I first went in out of high school, I was in the Navy and came out of sea school as a Tomahawk fire controlman. So ended up going to USS Normandy as a pre-com unit, so it hadn't been commissioned yet. Was on the commissioning crew, so as an initial crew member, so I'm a plank owner. We did the first Gulf War as our maiden voyage, and ended up, shooting Tomahawk missiles and stuff during that time frame. And that was back before the internet, so things were, interesting when it came to snail mail and getting things, through the supply chain. Then, after almost an 11-year break, I went back in, went into the Army, and after 9/11, and I did 2 years enlisted as a common ground station operator, intel, and then commissioned and went in as an intel officer there, and retired as a major.
So during your period in the Navy, how would mail delivery work?
Well, we were the ship I was assigned to was attached to the USS America, so it was an aircraft carrier. So all your mail and stuff would go to an APO exit point and go to that carrier task group, and it'd be flown into the carrier, and then from the carrier it'd divvy out all the mail and stuff to the rest of the fleet by rotary wing usually, helos and stuff, or during a unit rep they would take and transfer it over to the ships that didn't have a helo pad or whatever, or a drop. So that's how we'd get our mail and stuff out at sea, along those lines.
And how would mail typically work when you were in the Army?
Army would go through kind of the same system where it'd go through an APO. It'd be brought into the country that we were at, and then distributed there to the different bases or FOBs that we were located on. You would have a mail courier, somebody that had to go through the training and everything with the unit. They would be the only ones that could sign for the mail. They go pick it up from the local post office, for lack of a better term, and take it back to the unit and then distribute it out to each of the personnel.
Okay. So with this, maybe, sounds to me anyway that the Navy system was a little more complex. Did that lead to difficulties in mail delivery?
It could. There was times when personality could come into it, because each ship would have a postal clerk, but they were still beholden to the more senior postal clerk that was part of the task force or whatever, usually assigned to the aircraft carrier. Or we had cases where we didn't get mail delivered for a month because our postal clerk had upset the postal clerk on the aircraft carrier, and in retribution he just wasn't moving any mail. He wasn't sending any mail of ours out, and we weren't getting any mail from the aircraft carrier. So sometimes it could be a little more problematic, because like I said, they'd have to actually fly an aircraft out to the task group and deliver the mail to the aircraft carrier before it could then disseminate it from there. So yeah, it could be weather and everything else could make delays, and depending on what kind of operations and op tempos were going on, could also make delays.
About how frequently would you say that significant delays occurred?
Um, it depends on, whether you were in combat operations or not. So, like our maiden voyage was a combat operation. The next time we went out, it was a standard deployment. Um, so those tend to be more routinely monitored, and things happen in a more scheduled manner. So for the most part, it wasn't too bad on a regular deployment. Combat operations are a little bit different anyway, because everything the enemy has to say, so.
So you mentioned that some of the delays were caused by personality disagreements.
Sometimes.
How would those typically be resolved?
In our case, it ended up being resolved when the task force commander, a rear admiral, came on board our ship and started asking questions about why the morale was so low. And one of the shipmates of ours mentioned that we hadn't gotten mail for almost a month. So when he heard that, he came a little unglued, and we ended up getting 6 or 8 helos worth of mail that day after he got back to the aircraft carrier. So it got resolved pretty quick, because the military does take that pretty serious, because it does have such an impact on morale. If you don't get mail from your loved ones back home and stuff, it doesn't matter which branch you're in, people's minds start playing games with them and stuff, and they start wondering what's going on with their loved ones and stuff. Why aren't they writing? Is there something wrong? Did they leave me? That kind of stuff. And it can really play with people and their emotions and everything else, which impacts your mission. When you're in combat operations, especially, it can be really detrimental.
So would you say that that happened, maybe frequently is not quite the right word, but these personality disagreements that required a higher up officer to solve, was that a common thing, or was that fairly rare?
I've only seen it once in the 6 years that I was in, so I would say it's not a real common thing, and I'm sure that some heads rolled when it was found out, that mail wasn't going anywhere. And but like I said, it wasn't a common thing.
So you said that it was 6 helicopters full of mail that ended up being delivered. How much mail could be fit into one helicopter?
I'm not exactly sure what the carrying capacity of the lamps were. But you're talking probably, I'd say, probably about 2 or 3 metric tons of mail, quite a bit during that course of that day. You're talking packages, letter mail, everything. So, and when you're looking forward to getting a care package from loved ones or whatever that has some home baked cookies or zucchini bread or something like that, and it's been sitting there for a month, it's kind of, heart-rendering for sure. Because back then, we didn't have the internet, you didn't have Zoom, you didn't have Skype, you didn't have anything like that. So you relied solely on snail mail. And if you didn't get it, it's kind of sad. And same thing with your loved ones. They're not getting mail, from you on a regular basis. They start to wonder what's going on, on your end. So it happens.
So in the delivery process, do you recall situations where mail just got lost? Either in the Navy or the Army?
You always are going to have some, loss or whatever that can happen or whatever. And it can happen stateside. It can happen, and once it reaches the military side of the house. They're usually pretty thorough, though. It's, usually not too much of an issue. But one of the issues you can have is when you're in a foreign country, oftentimes you're utilizing their mail system, and they can confiscate items and stuff. And I have had items confiscated out of care packages and stuff for whatever reason, they decide to open it up, check, make sure that, it's not contraband according to what they, call contraband. And then, you can lose some stuff along those lines. So.
Okay. So you mentioned that you had lost packages in the, or not lost packages, but lost items out of packages. But would you say how often would that occur? That the local post people?
Not often. Now, that's something different. The mail system, and of course we're talking the mail system. Supply channels, that could be totally something different. And I can talk unofficially or whatever, because there was quite a bit of loss, through the supply channels and stuff going through Pakistan. But as far as the mail system and stuff, you might. They didn't allow any kind of magazines or anything that showed any kind of skin. So anything you could have a subscription to, Sports Illustrated or whatever. If there was too much skin being shown on the cover for their liking, they could confiscate it. So I'm sure it happened more often than I probably was aware of. But for me, I can only think of one or two things that didn't make it.
Okay.
So you always try to. Command would always try to put forward to the families and stuff prior to deployment items that they knew were prohibited, so that they didn't even run the risk of having things confiscated. So.
Okay. So about how often would you say that you received mail and packages and stuff?
I mean, when I was in the Navy, probably about once a week was when we'd usually get a regular, mail call. In the Army and stuff, that could be daily. It all just depended. And for me, I'd get probably 2 or 3 days a week. I'd get something, So you try to stay in contact, but it was easier once I was in the Army, because by that time we had the internet, you had phone calls and stuff, which was much easier to contact loved ones back home and stuff, and so you weren't as reliant on the mail services itself. Care packages and stuff, I'd probably get once a week, once every 10 days, something like that.
So how would sending stuff back home work?
You go down. So the Navy, you go to your postal clerk and stuff, and he'd put postage on whatever it was you'd buy, book of stamps, or, you're sending a package, he'd weigh it and tell you how much, and you'd pay for it, and they'd go ahead and send it out. The Army, once I was in the Army, you'd have a book of stamps or whatever, and you'd take and put however many stamps you needed, but you could take it down to the local collection point, mail office and stuff, and they could weigh it and do everything that they needed to, so that you knew how much that you needed to pay for postage.
So you had to pay postage to send things home?
It depended on whether you're in a combat zone or not. Combat zones, most of the time they actually tried to go postal free. So oftentimes we didn't have to send, we didn't have to pay for it or whatever. But if you weren't, you'd have to pay. So there was deployments that I had or whatever where I wasn't in a deployment zone, so you'd end up having to pay or whatever. A regular med cruise, something like that, you'd have to pay. But if you're in a combat zone, you wouldn't have to.
You wouldn't happen to remember what the rate was, would you?
No, I want to say standard first class stamp was like 16, 17 cents, when I was in the Navy. Of course, it's gone up significantly since then, so I couldn't tell you exactly what it was by the time I was in the Army. I didn't send a whole lot out that way. When I did, sometimes it was like boxes getting ready to come home, getting ready to end the deployment or whatever, and didn't have enough room to put it in, a bag or something like that. So,
Gotcha. So, what were some of the things that you remember receiving in packages?
like I said, cookies, zucchini bread, different types of trail mixes and stuff. But then you'd also get a lot of sanitary, and hygiene type items. So hand wipes, razors, disposable razors and stuff, soaps, lotions, chapstick, things along those lines would get sent, quite a bit. Things like we call, podunk or, pogey bait, stuff like that. So Slim Jims, beef jerky, cans of peanuts and things along those lines. You get stuff like that. The convenient size, the travel size stuff. And it, gave you a taste of home. So.
Do you remember other soldiers receiving similar items, or were there any in particular that sort of jump out to you as memorable that somebody got?
When you're downrange like that, people tend to share quite a bit, but most of it was kind of the same standard type fare most of the time. Anything that really stood out? People chow would be, so it's like Chex Mix, but with a kind of a powdered sugar type mix on it that we'd get around Christmas time or whatever. That was really good. You get bags and bags of that kind of stuff. Can't really think of anything else, that was kind of out of the norm, because like I said, a lot of it, people kind of go by the guidelines, for what, the military feels would be good, for care packages and stuff. And like I said, a lot of hygiene type items and stuff like that would get sent and distributed around or whatever. Coffee was one, though, that would get sent occasionally. And you'd be surprised at just how quickly that got scarfed up. Good coffee. So other than that, that's pretty much it.
Do you remember any situations where somebody got something in a package that they weren't technically supposed to have?
No, because usually by the time it got to the service member, it had already been, looked through or whatever and scanned, and anything that was considered contraband, it would have been pulled out. So you don't even know half the time that it was even coming to you or whatever. So different countries in the Middle East and whatnot, they don't like pork type products and stuff being sent, or like I said, any kind of magazines or anything like that that might show too much skin in their viewpoint would be confiscated. But other than that, I can't think of anything that would have been taken or whatever.
Okay. So, in your experience, were letters handwritten or were they typed and printed,
Well, so we get, from family members and stuff, usually always handwritten. We'd also get stuff from like schools, where a class would get together and write a bunch of letters and stuff to service members. And that would come in, to a unit or whatever and get divvied out. And then soldiers and sailors and airmen and stuff would take and, respond back to these kids and stuff and handwrite them and send them thank yous, and send that back handwritten. So the vast majority of correspondence was probably handwritten.
So how often would you get these packages from like schools and
It can be fairly often. The major holidays, you know, usually always got stuff from schools and stuff. Um, so you could end up around Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff. You'd get a bunch of stuff. Usually Valentine's Day, St. Patty's Day, and stuff like that. Sometimes you'd get a bunch of stuff that come in from schools. You know, Easter, stuff like that. So, yeah, it would happen kind of in waves like that, where you'd get them around the holidays, different holidays throughout the school year.
so did you ever receive any other packages from strangers, or did your unit?
Yes, quite often actually. You get packages from various organizations and stuff that were trying to do their part or whatever for the war effort, and so you get, and they were pretty standard. That's where you'd end up getting a bunch of hand sanitizer, a bunch of goodie bags or whatever with maybe some hard candy and stuff in it. Things that didn't travel real well, usually were tried to kept out and stuff. Things like chocolate, oftentimes didn't do too well in the heat. So a lot of that kind of stuff wouldn't actually be sent, but you'd get, like I said, lots of little individual packets of peanuts and cashews, stuff like that. Teas, tea bags and stuff like that you could get. So, things that were nice and convenient that people thought would help, spice things up a little bit, including, spices and stuff to help with the food or whatever, little Tabasco, bottles and stuff like that or whatever, or some kind of sauce from back home you occasionally get to.
So, in your opinion, why do you think organizations and schools sent these sorts of packages?
Well, I think at the time, there was a patriotic fervor to do something, and to help with the morale and stuff of the different service members that were being sent into harm's way after 9/11 and what happened during that time frame. So I think that everybody felt that it was doing their part. It happened after the first Gulf War. You got a lot of care packages and stuff, and companies that were donating a lot of products and stuff, and it helps the morale. When you get a pallet of kudos bars or something like that, something that you don't normally haven't seen in months, when you're downrange. So I think that's probably a big part of the reason why they were doing it. So just trying to do their thing and help the service members out.
You mentioned that companies would occasionally send things.
Occasionally. So you get different organizations and stuff, and a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations and stuff that were involved in care packages and stuff, and they get donations from their community or whatever, or different church organizations. Occasionally you get some companies, Walmart and some of these others, that would donate, and they'd send a couple semi-loads worth of various products and stuff to the to the theater, and it'd get distributed out to the units and stuff. And like I said, Desert Storm, we seen cases and pallets of kudos bars and stuff sent to us. That was all company driven, trying to help morale or whatever, I guess, as well.
Okay. So, did you have a particularly favorite package that you remember receiving?
You know you're gonna get me in trouble. No, I mean, you always look forward, whether it was packages from my wife, whether it's packages from my mother or my mother-in-law or my sister-in-law, my sister or any of them. You always look forward to getting those packages because you always like the home baked goods. Banana nut bread, zucchini bread, various cookies, and stuff like that, especially around the holidays. That was always really, I always look forward to. So I always look forward to the personal packages that were coming to me. Other packages that, I'd get from a company or whatever and stuff, it was nice to get, but you knew you weren't going to necessarily get any home baked goods. So it was always the home baked stuff that was really always looked forward to.
So, would you say that it's fair to characterize that getting letters and packages from home was a significant morale booster for soldiers?
It was a significant morale booster for soldiers. Like I said, you could tell that the mood would just improve significantly when you had a mail call and people got care packages and stuff. And it's really amazing just how service members can be so giving of of a package that is sent to them. They're always willing to share the contents and stuff with their fellow service members and stuff. So you get some service members that may not get a package or whatever, but they always got to partake of others. So that was always look forward to. So it helped morale quite a bit.
In your opinion, why was there this culture of sharing with packages?
Well, when you're deployed, especially when you're in harm's way, it becomes about your fellow service members. You may be there, because your country sent you there, but it ends up being about the service member to your right and to your left. It's always about them. So when you're in a foxhole and there's bullets flying or mortars or whatever, you're always worried about them, and that's who you're fighting for at that particular time. Well, same thing as far as morale and stuff like that. You're always looking out for each other. They call each other battle buddy for a reason, and that's part of it. And that's sharing the contents out of an MRE. It could be sharing contents out of a care package. So it helps everybody, and it helps unit cohesion. So.
Okay. So, do you think that the proliferation of phones and the internet is helping or hurting overall just general morale?
That one's a tricky one. It's kind of a double-edged sword. The proliferation of technology helps, family and their service members stay in contact. And so that can be a huge morale boost, especially if you've known that an incident has happened, to be able to know that your service member is safe. That being said, from a command standpoint, it can be very problematic because of OPSEC reasons. Operational security. You may be getting ready to conduct operations, and you could have some private on his cell phone basically spewing everything that's going on and jeopardize the safety and stuff of service members. The not thinking about what it is they're doing, and it can happen, and it has happened. So it is a double-edged sword. From a morale standpoint and stuff, it's good. But from an operational standpoint, it's a quagmire. So I hope that answers that question.
So, in your experience, did you notice letters or packages arriving slower as the your deployment went on? So as in like the longer you were there, did things slow down?
I think there's always an initial rush when you first deploy. You're always going to have that initial shock of separation and stuff of families and their service members. Over time, they get into a routine, and they kind of settle into a regular routine on mail and everything else as well. So where you may have gotten 2 or 3 letters when you first started, it may slow down to, a letter a week or something like that. One of the ways that my family ended up combating that was my wife coordinated with other family members so that they could stagger, packages and stuff, so that I always had something coming in as opposed to everything coming in at one time, and then having a big break and not having anything come in for, a month. So that was one of the beneficial things about having multiple family members coordinating. So your answer to that is, yeah, over time, I think you kind of see things typically slow down just because people get into a routine, and they know that they're in for the long haul at that point, and so family members and stuff kind of slow their the number of letters or whatever into a routine.
So since you're retired, have you been involved in any sort of care package making efforts?
I can't say that I have myself. I have donated to some organizations that do, but I haven't actually, volunteered to do it myself. I know that my wife was still doing some stuff when I first retired, but that's slowed down as well.
So, presuming that you had reason to, what would you include in a package sent over? Say you did one today or something.
Yeah, like I said, service members always kind of look for some of the stuff from home or whatever. One of the things that was always kind of looked forward to is things like socks, because you're tired of wearing the same socks or whatever, for months on end. They start to get a little threadbare and whatnot. So it's always kind of nice to have simple things like socks. Other things, of course, is always like hand sanitizer and stuff like that. And other items that we've talked about and whatnot, hand wipes and chapstick and things along those lines. But it's always kind of nice to be able to throw in, different types of, candies or whatever, from home. Something along those lines.
Is there anything that you noticed being sent a lot that you felt maybe not was unnecessary, but was
overrepresented?
Overrepresented, yeah.
There for a while, one of my deployments in the Army, I did just shy of 16 months in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne. And we got an awful lot of hand wipes, so after a while you do get tired of, sending hand wipes because they were everywhere. So that would probably be the one item I can think of that may have been over represented in every care package at the time, but I'll tell you, when you don't have them and you've been out, in the doing a patrol or whatever, and you've been out 10 days without a shower, it's kind of nice to have them, during that time frame, because even just a a to wipe your face and stuff with, a hand wipe definitely helps your morale. It definitely makes life a little bit more bearable. But that'd be the only thing I can really think of that I, at times, thought was overrepresented. So.
Okay. Well, was there anything else that came to mind that didn't get brought up in the interview that you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can really think of. I think we covered most of it as far as care packages and stuff like that. Like I said, one of the things that we occasionally would get over there or whatever that was really appreciated was coffee. And you got other organizations that are out there now that donate quite a bit or whatever. Black Rifle Coffee Company and some of those that when they get a purchase, they put so much of their proceeds into donations and stuff that go out. But the biggest thing is just making sure that you reach out to your loved ones. That'd be the biggest thing. That's the big morale booster and stuff, is just knowing that people back home care about what it is you're doing and that you're not forgotten. You're not there for no reason. So that'd be about it.
Well, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed.
You're welcome. Or, killed in combat, and the family finds out through technology before the unit can make the proper notifications to the proper channels, and that gets really sticky pretty quick. Because you got friends that end up contacting a spouse or something like that, and they find out through them as opposed through the official channels, and that really gets pretty.
What was the procedure? I assume there was an official procedure for if there was a death in action.
Yeah, there is, and so as a company commander, if I had a casualty, I had to contact my higher headquarters and stuff. Then there'd be a battle drill where they would end up going to their higher headquarters. They would go to Big Army so that they could make notifications to the Casualty Assistance Program, so that they could have people there that are trained in how to handle the emotional aspect of the release of the information to the family members.
So was there any method to try and prevent the information getting out earlier, or was it just to try and get the official stuff done as quick as possible?
Yeah, you had a set time that you had to get that information to higher headquarters and stuff, and they tried to do it in a very timely manner. Like I said, the casualty notification system, each base has a pool of people that they pull from. Those people, you'll have a chaplain, and you'll have usually a casualty assistance officer that can help with the legal side of the house, so that they can help steer the family towards needed resources and stuff to make sure that money is still coming in and all this other stuff, so that they're being taken care of, so that they're not being evicted from their house and stuff because all of a sudden the paycheck's not there or whatever. Make sure that everything's taken care of so that those service members' families are taken care of, because it is such an iffy thing, but like I said, technology sometimes circumvents that and can create a lot of issues, partly because you have the family getting notified before it's come out officially, but you also can have the wrong information get put out, because one of the things that always tends to happen in combat, the first report is always wrong. So you always wait for that follow-on information to come in, so that you have the right information before it gets sent out. And sometimes what's happened is, oh, did you hear so-and-so, was killed? Well, come to find out it wasn't so-and-so, it was this person. Well, then you have people that, hear that through the grapevine, and they know this other person's spouse, so they contact them directly, get them all stirred up when there was no reason to. So,
Do you know how many times that happened, or?
I couldn't tell you. It happened a couple times when we were downrange or whatever, where information got out that shouldn't have. But for the most part, you try to keep that down to a minimum. But with all the bases and stuff, and all of them having access to the internet, it's easy for them to put it out via computer or cell phone wasn't quite as big a problem. It can be an issue. We actually did have a case when we came back. When we came back from that 16-month deployment, the unit itself, 4th Brigade, was a brand new unit. It had only been in existence for about 8 months when we deployed. So the Army, Big Army didn't have all the barracks and everything else for this unit that just stood up. So they were in the process of building new barracks and everything while we were downrange. When we came back, it wasn't done yet. So they took and put all the service members back into the old barracks, which were from World War II. They were old barracks. And there was issues. They were getting ready to tear them down, when they decided to stand these units up. Well, they were still standing when we got back, so they put them back in there, and they had some unsanitary living conditions in some of them. And
what base was this?
This was in Bragg. Yeah. But it ended up creating an issue because one service member ended up sending a video to his dad. His dad sent it on to his congressman. And next thing you know, Army across the board was doing inventories of their barrack spaces. Mm. So it happens. It got things moving, but usually bucking the chain of command like that usually doesn't go real well. Usually, eventually, found out who it, came from or whatever, and it can make life a little tough on them. Yeah, just because that wasn't the proper way to go about it, but it happens. Shouldn't have been put back in the old barracks, but construction fell behind, schedule and stuff, and it happens.
So when you were on your final deployment, were there communication hubs set up in the various bases in country, or was it still, or was that before they had started doing that?
No, I mean when I was in the Army and stuff. So you're receiving and input output RSOI bases. That's where all your personnel funnel in. They do all their initial in-country briefs and all that kind of stuff, and all their initial in-processing. They always had places where you could go, like an internet cafe or whatever, so that you could reach out to your loved ones and let them know that you're in country and stuff like that. So those places had them. And most of your FOBs all had access, might be limited, but some form of access to, to phones or whatever. When I first went in the military and when I was in the Navy, you didn't have phones. You had to wait until you did a port call that had phones to be able to call back home or whatever. But in the Army, that was much more of the standard. On each base had, you could go to the headquarters building and stuff and be able to contact back home if need be or whatever. So,
Do you remember any sort of controversies that arose from those?
Like I said, a couple times we had the issues where, instead of letting the proper channel take care of, casualty notification or whatever, service member took it on themselves to contact people. That was some of the biggest issues, that you could have or whatever. That I can really think of off the top of my head, at this point or whatever. It's something along those lines. But, as far as technology was concerned,
Gotcha.
Like I said, you can always have problems when things are taken out of context too. When you get a video that's shot and then selectively edited, to paint a different picture than what actually happened. You can always have things like that. I just seen this morning on the internet where there's a video of a F-35 that crash landed on an aircraft carrier out in the South China Sea, where video hit Twitter and Instagram and everything else from somebody sitting there videotaping it off the flight deck. Was that officially released? No, but it's out there. So, so it happens.
Gotcha.
So, got anything else, or is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, unless you can think of something interesting you just want to talk about, I can't think of any other relevant questions.
Yeah.
Really. The reason I asked about the controversy is because my last interview was with a retired first sergeant who was air medic in working with in the Army, and when he first got in country as a senior NCO, or functioning as one anyway, there was a massive controversy about people getting caught watching pornography on the government computers.
I mean, I think it probably happened, but so yeah, technology along those lines could be a problem. We actually had more problems with our Afghan counterparts in some of that, so yeah, you had different things along those lines, and you had various videos that got circulated and stuff of, Afghans doing things to animals they shouldn't be doing. Let's just put it that way. Things like that. It's like, oh my gosh. When you're sitting there watching drone feed and stuff, and you see them start doing things with animals that, is just not natural. Yeah. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things that get circulated and stuff out there or whatever. So, and of course, you always have the problem of security, whether it be information security, whether it be operational security and stuff, because people can accidentally capture stuff on videos that they don't think that they're capturing. As an intel guy, one of my concerns is operational security. Somebody could be sitting there videotaping, saying hi to mom and stuff, just walking to the chow hall, and he's can take and post that, but that information in the background can give locations of different types of buildings and where personnel sleep, all kinds of different things that people don't think about. So that's one of the issues that can happen with technology. As a matter of fact, as a company commander, I ran counter intel teams, I ran HUMINT teams and SIGINT, all kinds of. I ran different intel collection teams. We could go on the internet and pull up videos on Instagram and all these others of the very fobs we were putting our people into that literally showed the whole layout to include how far somebody had to walk from their berthing to the latrine or to the chow hall or to the headquarters building. All that information, you start giving little pieces of puzzles. That's what Intel does. They take pieces of a puzzle, they put them together until they get a mosaic of what's going on. Well, we can do it, they can do it. And, you know, we had some pretty accurate rocket fire and stuff and mortar attacks and whatnot that have been, could be based off of things that people put out through technology that they didn't even think about. You know, so.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago there was a thing where like Fitbits and other stuff like that were banned from being used on bases for that exact reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, because smartwatches and stuff like that, anything that connects to the internet can be hacked. You know, that's one of the things that seems to be lost on a lot of things. You know, the voting. You know, these voting machines and stuff. If they connect to the internet, they can get hacked. If there's an access point, it can get hacked. So that's one of the issues that can happen, you know, through smartwatches, Fitbits, anything like that that has a Bluetooth, you know, connection. It can get hacked. They can listen. They can turn it on. You know, we're not the only sophisticated you know team out there and stuff that can do this. So yeah, you know, quite frankly, how do you think China ended up stealing so much of our technology? You know, they didn't go from a third world backwater country to a burgeoning superpower in 35 years without stealing a lot of technology to get there. And they've done a very good job of it. And of course, we let them, you know, because we weren't paying attention to what it was they were doing. Goes back to politics, you know, we tend to plan in 2 and 4 year cycles. They plan in 50 and 100 year cycles. So at any rate, that's all I can kind of really think about, you know.
It's been very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first interview I did was a Navy veteran from the Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
Though he does not describe himself as a Vietnam veteran because he didn't see any combat. That's his personal definition.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's just it. Like a lot of times, and that's one of the controversies you see in the veterans world, you know, about combat, you know, or Vietnam vet. If somebody was in during that era but never went over, are they considered a Vietnam vet? For the most part, no. They're of that era, but they never actually went into theater, so they try not to.
He was an airplane. He repaired airplanes and helicopters on a carrier.
But in that case, he was within the theater. So I would say that yes, you know, because you still have an inherent danger. Even if you're not in active combat roles, you know, on an active aircraft carrier and stuff, there's inherent danger. That video I was telling you about, there's 7 people that got injured due to that landing mishap with that F-35. You never know. I mean, one of the supply ships that we were with, part of our task force, they had a guy that they were cleaning some of their, so when they send refueling probes over, they shoot a line over to the receiving ship from the supply ship. Then that gets put through a pulley system and gets pulled by hand by a crew to bring over the refueling probe from the refueling ship. And it puts into a port and they turn it on and they fill off, top off the tanks. Well, those lines that they pull that probe over with, it gets a little bit of fuel and stuff on it and stuff, just from a little bit of overspray and stuff. So every once in a while they'll do what they know as a line wash. They'll take and basically drag those lines over the side of the ship to clean off all that oil and that fuel oil and stuff. Well, they were doing that on one of the supply ships, and they ended up having one of the lines let go, and so they had what was known as a running line. So it was being pulled out to sea due to the friction of the water, and a guy tried to step on it to keep it from running, and it wrapped around his leg and pulled him through an 8-inch chock. So it's an inherently dangerous job. When you're at sea and everything else, you never know when you might have to be out on the weather deck during rough, weathering, inclement weather or whatever. So it's always inherently dangerous. Or you could be doing repairs, working on an aircraft or working on a piece of equipment on the ship, and if procedures aren't properly followed and tag out procedures aren't properly done, you could get hit with 50,000 volts, in what's known as a bathtub environment. You're literally sitting in a bath of water on a steel ship. So chances are you could die pretty quick from something. So, people unfortunately sometimes don't take enough credit for the danger that they do face on some of that stuff, because they don't want to take away from their fellow service member. Service members that actually, may have seen a whole lot more combat, but, I'll be honest. I always felt when I was in the Army and I was downrange in Afghanistan and stuff, I felt safer outside the wire than I did inside the wire. Because inside the wire, you're a sitting target. They sit there and launch mortars and rockets at you all day long. That's the problem you get into. You're a sitting target and you're a known target. So I always felt safer on the outside than I did the inside. Just different.